Alright, so 2-2 is all about estimation. So we're still finding the percent of a number just like yesterday, but estimating is really where you're changing the numbers so that they're easier to work with, so that potentially you can do this without a calculator. Okay, so 60% of 500, when we look at that, or 62, I'm sorry, I would probably change that to 60%. That's going to make it easier to work with. So I want to do 60% of 500. Okay, to be able to do this in my head, we're going to break it down a little bit differently than yesterday. Yes, I could change this into a fraction or a decimal and then times 500. But in order to be able to do it in your head, you can break this 60% into an easier number. You can think about 10% of 500. And 10% of 500, well, the easiest way to do this is when you have 10% of something, you move it over one spot. So that would be 50. 10% of 500 is 50. Now, if I need to get that 10% to be 60%, because that's what the original problem was looking for, I need to take my 10% and times it by 6. 10% times 6 is 60%. So if I do that, 10% of 500 is 50, but I need 6 of those. 50 times 6 gives me 300. 5 times 6 is 30, tack a 0 on at the end. So that would be your answer for that one. Sometimes you might round the number itself rather than the percent. Sometimes you might be rounding both. In this case, I probably would keep the 5%, and I'll show you why that's not that hard to do. But I'd probably change this into 75% of 80. Now, there's a couple ways you could do this. You could find 25% and then multiply it by 3, or you could go the same way and just do 10%. A lot of people like to stick with 10%. 10% of 80 would be, well, move the decimal over one spot, 8. Now, I can't multiply exactly by a whole number to get 75, but I could go times 7. Oops. And that would give me 56. Now, that gives me 70, but I want 75. If I know that 10% of 80 is 8, well then half of that, 5%, would have to be, half of that, 4. So in this case, that's 70%, but I want 75%, so add that back on. So 56 plus 4, that gives me 60 as my final answer. Okay? On the next one, you would have 274% of 200. Now again, you could go to 275, or technically it's not that far off, you could go to 270. Either one would work. Let's go to 270%. Okay, if you did 275, you might just want to do your 5% at the end. So for 270%, I'm going to break that up first into 100%. Now, if I'm taking 100% of something, that means I am taking all of it. So I sometimes use the example, if I had 200 people in a room and I ask 100% of them to stand up, how many would stand up? Well, all 200. So 100% of 200 is 200. I need another 100%. So far I have 400. But that's only gotten me to 200. I still need that 70%. Well, if I take 10%, and that's 20. If I take 10% of 200, that's 20, but I need 70. So let's times by 7, times by 7. That would give me 7 times 2 is 14, tack on that 0, and then I add these up. So I would have 540. So 274% of 200 is 540. Okay. The last one, we have 3/4% of 1,020. Now, some people tend to get confused with this, and they think that means that 75%. That is not the case. Here, that means we're going to round this to the nearest whole number. That is 0.75%. So the nearest whole number is actually 1%. Anytime you have a fraction like that that's under 1, you just round to 1% or estimate to 1%. And I'm going to say 1% of, since this is a big number, you could keep it this way, but you could go to 1,000. Estimating's hard because there's no quite set rules, but the bigger the number is, the farther you can round. The smaller the number is, the less you want to round, because that means it's going to make it farther off the final answer. 1% of 1,000. Well, before, when we were taking 10%, we moved it over one spot. 100%, you keep it in the same spot. Now 1%, 10% was move it over 1. 1%, you're going to move it over 2. And in that case, that's all you had to do. 1% of 1,000 is 10. Make sure that if you have any questions, you are either emailing me, sorry about that, or asking in class.